Hello everyone and welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to create a new Angular project, an Angular 19 project, and we are going to use Tailwind CSS 4.2 in that. Some of you might already know how to do that, but since someone asked me this question, I'm assuming a lot of people may not. So first of all, you need to install the Angular CLI. So if you go to angular.dev, you can look into the documentation of getting started. So if you go here, you can say installation, and in here you have the right instructions. So for example, first of all, you need to have the latest Angular CLI installed. Once you have that, you can run new to actually create a new project. So I'm going to go to my terminal and I already have the Angular CLI installed, and you can check your Angular version by doing ng-version. You can see that right now I'm using 19.1.4. So I can do ng new and then I can give it a name. For example, I can say ng tailwind 4 app, for example. And I'm going to also use the style here to say that I'm going to use SCSS. You can choose CSS or you can say SCSS. And when you hit enter, it will go ahead and it would ask you some questions. For example, do I want server-side rendering? No, not at the moment. And now it creates my application. So just give it some time, let the packages be installed. Now you can see that the packages have installed successfully. So I can just do a clear and then I can open this into my editor. So I can say code and here I can say ng tailwind 4 app. You can basically open it in your VS Code directly by going into the VS Code. I just like to do this. Once you have opened this, you can basically go to view and here terminal to open the terminal. And from here, we are going to run further commands. And now that we have this installed, let's go to Tailwind CSS. So if you go here, you can see the get started button, click here, and now you'll see a bunch of options here. If you're using Veed, then you have to follow this particular tutorial, but you should go to framework guides and inside here you have Angular. You click that and then you can see all the commands. So we already have a project, so you don't really need to run these. So you can start from this one. So I'm going to copy this and I go back to my terminal and I paste this. And now we are installing Tailwind CSS, the Post CSS plugin of Tailwind CSS and Post CSS itself. And now that this is installed, you can see our package JSON should also contain this. So if you scroll down here, you can see Post CSS, Tailwind CSS 4.0.6. Now we need to go into our Post CSS RC JSON to get started. So here you'll see that I can copy this. And if you look at here, we don't really have a Post CSS RC JSON. This is one of the things that confused me when I was trying to work with Tailwind CSS 4. And third version, we had somehow the file created, but now we don't. So we need to create a file. So here we're going to go and say .post CSS rc.json and make sure you have the dot in the beginning of the file name. That's really important. Now you can copy this and now you can paste this right here. And now you can go here and copy the second one. And this should go into styles SCSS. So you copy this, you go back, you go into source and here styles.scss since we chose SCSS. And now you do this. Previously, we had like 3 statements that we needed to use for Tailwind CSS, but now it's 1. So I'm really happy about this. Now that we have this, we can just run npm start, which would basically run ngserve. So if you look at package.json here in the scripts, when we run the start one, it basically runs ngserve behind the scenes, which you can see right here as well. So once this runs, our application should be on localhost 4200 and we'll see how that looks like. All right, so here we go. Now, if I control click this, it will open in my browser and there you see. So we have an Angular application running at localhost 4200. You can see what comes out of the box from the Angular application. Now we're going to try to use some Tailwind CSS. So I'm going to go back and I'll go to my app folder and inside that we have app component HTML. If I go here, I can actually go all the way down where we have our HTML and just where our main is starting. So if we go up here, we can actually start saying bg red and let's say 500. If I save this and go back to my browser, you can see that the Tailwind CSS class is working. So that means we can now use Tailwind CSS from here. I'm also going to say text wide so it doesn't look as bad as it was. No, that doesn't fix it at all because all these things have their own text style. So the global white style is not working on them. One of the things that you also may want to have is when you're working with VS Code and Tailwind CSS, you need to have this extension of Tailwind CSS. So if you go here, you go to extensions and then you can try to find Tailwind CSS. And there you go. You can see that I have this here, but it doesn't work for some weird reason. So if I try to mouse over this, you can see that this doesn't really work. So it's not detecting our configuration. And one of the things that I also tried to do, which I have not shown in the recording, is I actually tried to run this thing called npx tailwind css init, which used to work in v3, which basically creates this tailwind config.js. And this should actually work, but it doesn't. So it doesn't really make things work. So here you can see it doesn't really work, which means that I can't run this command, which means that I can't really have this working, but what I can do is I can Google. So I did a quick Google, and here you can see that we have the editor setup documentation in Tailwind CSS v4. And from here, I actually went to the extensions code right here, and I actually found here that we have something for v4. So here you can see that it says experimental extension settings, and in here we have a config file configuration. So for Tailwind CSS v4, the extension scans the project for CSS files and determines the root CSS file. The problem here is that we are not really using CSS files, so it may not be able to detect it right away. So here we have CSS entry points. So this is the configuration that we are looking for. So I'm going to copy this. One of the things that I also want to mention here is that this is experimental, and here you can see that these settings may be changed or removed at any time. So until the extension really supports it, if you really want to work in the meantime, you can basically configure this. So if I go back to my code editor, and here I'm using cursor, but you're using VS Code, so it's quite the same. So in here you can go to preferences and settings. For me, it's VS Code settings. So I'm gonna go especially to this one, and here I'm gonna paste it. When I paste it, you can see that here it gives me the extensions. So I click this, I click edit in settings or settings JSON, and here we have this particular configuration automatically here, which is null by default. Here I need to specify where is my SCSS file. For me, it is inside the source folder. So if I go to source, I have styles.scss. So I go here src/styles.scss. Make sure that you have the name correct here. And once you save this and go back to your HTML, there you go. Now you can see that the extension work. It is showing me the colors as well, just like this. And if I start typing something, for example, ring, you can see all the IntelliSense is actually coming for Tailwind CSS. And there you go. Now you're working with Tailwind CSS 4 within VS Code in an Angular application. And that's pretty much it for this video. You saw how we can use Tailwind CSS 4 in an Angular application working with VS Code extension, and it might be the same for other editors out there as well with some configuration settings. If you like this video, press the thumbs up button and also subscribe to get more notifications. And I'm working on my next book, which is the Angular Signals book. And to be notified about that, just subscribe to the channel or subscribe to the newsletter that you can find in the description of this video. With that said, happy coding. I'm going to see you next time.